welcome to Elements of Ayurveda, Empowering Wisdom of Life. I'm your host, Colette, and in this podcast, I hope to empower you to take charge of your own health by sharing the holistic teachings of Ayurveda, the ancient healing tradition from India. We will also discuss topics like health and wellness, nutrition, yoga, fitness, meditation, breath work, and much more, as well as interviewing lots of inspiring people along the way. My humble wish is to help you to connect to your true nature, to Mother Nature, and to each other. If you like the content, be sure to subscribe to the show, and the new episodes will automatically download for you to enjoy. If you're new to Ayurveda, I recommend you listen to the first couple of episodes where I do an introduction to Ayurveda and the mind-body types. I've also set up a Facebook group for us to connect and to support each other, and I'd love for you to join me over at Elements of Ayurveda podcast group. And now, here's the show. Hello and welcome to Elements of Ayurveda. Today, I'm very happy to welcome Dr. Robert Keith Wallace, who is a pioneering researcher on the physiology of consciousness. His work has inspired hundreds of studies on the benefits of meditation and mind-body medicine. Dr. Wallace's findings have been published in Science, American Journal of Physiology, and Scientific American. He received his BS in physics and his PhD in physiology from UCLA, and he conducted postgraduate research at Harvard University. Dr. Wallace is the founding president of Maharishi University of Management and has helped establish graduate programs to train physicians, health professionals, and wellness consultants in Maharishi Ayurveda and integrative medicine. He is currently professor and chairman of the Department of Physiology and Health and a trustee of MUM. Dr. Wallace is the author of a number of books and has traveled around the world giving lectures at major universities and institutes on consciousness-based health programs. His most recent books are Dharma Parenting, Gut Crisis, and the Rest and Repair Diet. Dr. Wallace, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Well, given all your experience, I think I could just talk to you for hours and hours. But today, I'm going to have to focus on Dharma Parenting, which is a topic I'm really interested in, and I know my listeners are keen to talk about, but I think we're going to have you back to talk about your two most recent books, Gut Crisis and the Rest and Repair Diet. So we'll definitely have to have you back to chat about those in the future. Today, I would love to chat about your book, Dharma Parenting, Understanding Your Child's Brilliant Brain for Greater Happiness, Health, Success, and Fulfillment. All that sounds amazing, and I'm sure every parent out there listening right now is ready to hear your advice and read your book. But let's start with explaining what Dharma is and how is Dharma Parenting different?
Dharma is a beautiful word that's used in the East, in India, and in Japan and China. It is this kind of lovely word which has to do with your path in life. Mm-hmm. And of course, as parents, we all want to make sure that our child has the most successful, happiest path in life. So Dharma, is a natural concept to just, in the gentlest and nicest way, provide your child with knowledge about who they are, who you are, and what their strengths and weaknesses are inherent. And we really take a great deal from Ayurveda. This book is very, very much based on the ancient system of Ayurveda, which really identifies so much about you. And in this particular book, we've kind of emphasized more the behavioral aspects. But in other books, like the other two books you mentioned, I talk a lot about the diet and the various other health aspects. So this book, though, is really focused on kind of allowing you to, get a feeling of who your child is right from the beginning, and then, not impose who you are on the child, but really support and bring out the greatest qualities of your child.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And that's really it. Respecting that your child is an individual with an individual brain body type, as you put it, and just to nourish them so that they can thrive given their tendencies and skill sets.
Well, that's the great thing about Ayurveda. I mean, is that it does allow us to kind of get a feeling. You know, they have these two concepts, prakriti and vikriti. Mm-hmm. And prakriti is really what you're born with, and they talk about these three underlying principles, the doshas, vata, pitta, and kapha. And then the vikriti has to do with, you know, your current state of balance or imbalance, really. Mm-hmm. And both of them are helpful. On our website, dharmaparenting.com, we have quizzes you can take as a parent, and you can take it for your child too. Mm-hmm. And they allow you to kind of get a quick grasp of what your brain body type or your dosha type is. And then, so that's a good starting point right there. You get to,
that's great.
You know, so maybe I'm a pitta and my child's a vata. So right away, there's a huge amount of information right there that I can use to help my child.
Yes, and so key to understand this from a young age. Now, my listeners are very familiar with the body types of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, and understanding that we each have a unique ratio of different amounts of these doshas, maybe 2 or 3 within our constitution, and that there are mental tendencies. Can you talk to us a little bit about the different brain types?
Yeah, we use the word brain body type mostly to help people who don't know about Ayurveda, mm-hmm. because we want to emphasize that Ayurveda really identifies not just what's going on in your body, but also what's going on in your brain. And Dr. Travis, who is the co-author of the book, and myself, we wrote an article for an Ayurvedic journal, which we identified what we thought Vata, Pitta, and Kapha meant mm-hmm. in terms of neural networks, in terms of how the brain operates. So, you know, a Vata person, obviously, very quick to grasp things, has a, you know, ability to learn very quickly, but at the same time, they can forget, and they can, if they're a little out of balance, they can wander, and attention can shift in different directions. Mm. So we kind of developed in this paper a whole model of what that meant in terms of the different parts of the brain. And we did the same thing for Pitta and Kapha, just kind of trying to identify what were the underlying neurophysiological mechanisms which, you know, make a Vata person more sort of quick, enthusiastic, but, you know, changing focus. A Pitta person very on focus, but if they miss a meal, they get very irritated. And a Kapha person more steady and calm, but, you know, taking a little bit more time to process information. So we analyzed a lot of the different areas in the brain in terms of what that would mean for each of these types.
Fascinating, fascinating. So how early in life can we discover a child's brain body type?
You know, I think there probably are a lot of different opinions on how quickly you can do it. I think, you know, some people in the first few months, I would say within 3 months, you get a quick feeling of what's going on. Now, you may not be able to distinguish what they're born with what their current imbalance is. That could easily get mixed up because, you know, they're born with colic or something, then right away you've got this super demanding situation and you're focused really on their digestion right in the beginning. But, you know, even just as a child, as you know, in those first 3 months, they just behave differently in how they pay attention to things and how they, you know, act, what their strengths and weakness. Kapha child, I mean, it's just so easy. They go to sleep on time. You can sleep. Oh my God, it's so simple. You know, Vata, Pitta child, if they're, you know, have any digestive problems, it's just brutal, you know, and you barely get any sleep at all. So the questions are pretty simple on the quiz, and you can pretty much answer them, or at least you can guess at them within the first 3 months, I think, pretty well.
Great. And of course, when they start expressing themselves and becoming a little bit more animated, it's even easier when they start being able, right?
Much easier. And you know, it might change. You know, you might reevaluate. And again, because you're not always picking their prakriti, what they're born with, you're more or less with these questions looking at their current state of imbalance,
Exactly. And this is what I talk to clients when I do my online consultations, trying to explain to them. I think people almost get too caught up in what's my dosha makeup or what's my brain body type, rather than what we need to be looking at more importantly is the current state of imbalance, or what's going on at this present moment.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole key to Ayurveda, is really understanding how to prevent a further imbalance. So you just catch it right at the beginning there.
Yeah.
And, just with a few real easy signs. And the book is filled with charts. I mean, in some ways, the book is a relationship book.
Yes.
Which you wouldn't guess that, but that is what it is, because, you have a relationship with a child has a relationship with other children, and much of the book is devoted to how, Vata gets along with a Pitta, how a Pitta gets along with a Kapha. I mean, you can have a play date, and you can have a very Vata child, and then you introduce them to a Kapha child, and you better know what's happening. Otherwise, things, can get a little out of hand, especially if one of the children's a Pitta child.
Yes.
So and you've got to make sure the kids are fed on time. And
right.
There's just so many little ins and outs that Ayurveda tells us about, which really helps us. And that is the key to the whole thing. And, Ayurveda puts a big emphasis on digestion. I mean, that's where it's so important. And so, in this day and age, we're with children, we have to be really careful. I mean, a lot of the later books I talk about, but they could easily have been included in Dharma Parenting, are about the microbiome and about how this sort of gut bacteria gets established. Now, in Ayurveda, there's no obvious equivalent of a microbiome, but they do say in Ayurveda that Vata is located in the colon, and that's where the microbiome is. So, and they also say that Vata controls the nervous system, and now it turns out the microbiome, all these, 30 trillion gut bacteria, that's what the largest majority of the microbiome is, all the, microbes that live on or in us. And so I think there's huge insights in Ayurveda that can help us as parents with digestion. It's a different world we live in now. Suddenly we can take antibiotics. Well, how's that affecting your kids? Right. It's destroying this really important part. So you have to, be prepared to, and antibiotics are pretty critical. If your child is really, really sick, you thank God for antibiotics. They save the child's life. But then you need to know, what's the best probiotic, or how am I going to restore it? What kinds of foods can I give to help them restore? Do I keep them in a super hygienic environment, or do I let them play in the dirt? I mean, eating dirt, believe it or not, is probably one of nature's great ways of exposing us to all kinds of bacteria and helping us develop a proper immune system. So a lot of those, they're on that website, Dharma Parenting. There's also a whole chart on probiotics for kids. And on the other websites, I'm sure you'll mention later, there's also probiotic ratings. So, I mean, it's a whole new world where we suddenly have to think about Ayurvedic concepts with our kids. Are they building up ama toxins? Is the agni strong enough? And, mostly when you're young, these things work well, but when they don't, it can be a disaster.
Absolutely. And it's so amazing now to see modern science and research agreeing with what Ayurveda was saying over 5,000 years ago, that our microbiome is paramount to overall health and in fact can affect our mind as well and our nervous system. And that it is such a wealth of information that Ayurveda gives us on these body-brain types that can help each parent make decisions easier, especially if your child can't communicate. If you have more of an understanding of their tendencies and what their signs or the signs of imbalance are for that particular child's constitution, it can help you make decisions a lot easier. Like you said, parents could get a handle on this information. They could really support their child and help them understand why they are different from their friends and what their tendencies are and what they need to support them physically and mentally.
Yep, exactly.
So you mentioned earlier about colliding, say, if you are a parent who's Pitta and you have a Kapha child. And you mentioned that in the book, and I think that's very interesting, when these brain-body types collide. Can you explain a little bit more about this, Dr. Wallace?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is one of those things that really, really helps you. And we do all the combinations. You know, of course, like you said, everybody's a little bit of everything, so it's not. But we just take the pure types as an example. And the notion there is just that, you know, hey, if you're a Pitta parent with a Pitta kid, it's pretty simple. You know, you guys are in sync. You know, you're you know, doing a lot of athletics. You got to be careful that you both eat on time, otherwise you could get into major battles. But in general, you know, there's a lot of understanding there. You know that you stay out of the sun, drink more. You know, all these sorts of things are very important. But like you said, you know, if you're a Pitta mom and you have a Kapha child, you know, it's not quite the same thing. That child may not want to do all the athletics that you love to do. That child can skip a meal and not have a problem, whereas you can't. That child might be a little slower in getting up in the morning and getting ready, and you're all ready to get them out the door, and they're still, you know, eating their last bite of breakfast. You know, what do you do? Do you rush them? Do you put them on your schedule? Or do you kind of recognize who they are, plan ahead? I mean, you're a good Pitta parent. You can have all this down. You can, you know, you're very, very capable of organizing. So you just plan for a little extra time. You know you're not going to get your child to change their habits right away. It's going to take a long time and a lot of coaxing. And you just figure that into the equation. And so you don't get upset. And just simple things like that. You know, if you have a Vata child, again, you know, you're a Pitta parent, you're massively organized. You know what everything's going to happen in the day. Routine is very, very important for you, as it is for Kapha. But for a Vata child, they don't actually like a routine. They'd like it to be different every time. And they're just as happy just kind of wandering around. And so maybe you put a big chart on the wall, a big, you know, this is what we do during the day. So you can, you know, kind of bring their attention to it. Oh, yeah, that's right. At this time we have a snack. Isn't that great? All right, let's sit down and have a snack. And that's kind of what they need. And if you try to push them too hard, they're sensitive. It'll backfire and they'll just shrink. And so you've got to be super, super careful to keep them in balance, keep them out of the wind, the cold. You've got to give them hot liquids, all the kinds of things that'll make them happy and enthusiastic. And then as a Pitta parent, you're perfect for them because you can organize everything they need to do. They love creativity. Sign them up for dance, sign them up for music, you know, great. But if you don't know that and you try to force them into some severe athletics or something, it just backfires on you. So I think it's a huge, huge advantage to know how the worlds collide and how you prevent those collisions.
Right, exactly. And it's in the day now of conscious parenting where it's about really being aware of your own mind-body type and also knowing that, you know, not to impose that on your child or to have them live out your dreams or aspirations, that this is an individual that's coming to this world with their own skills and tendencies and dreams, and it's really about nourishing that. So I know you talked about this in the book about how it's important for parents to heal themselves as well, and not only heal themselves but also to understand themselves and understand their tendencies, so that they have an understanding of themselves first, and then they can help their child grow and learn, and without imposing their beliefs or their tendencies on that child.
Yeah, I think that's, you know, it's really hard these days if you're a single parent and you're working. I mean, it's kind of tough to manage. And if you have a kid that's super overactive and, you know, you're trying to, you come home exhausted and you're trying to manage a Pitta kid, let's say you're a Vata person and you've just gotten wiped out from work, you're sensitive. And then, you know, you're expected to suddenly perform at a high level with your kid because they're Pitta and they really demand. They want to do this, they want to do that. So you have to know at that point a couple of things. One, fatigue is the enemy. So you have to get help. Whatever you can do, you got to get it, friends, family, whatever. But there's a moment there where you need to take a quick nap so you can be fresh and alert. And once you get that, and once you organize that, life becomes a million times easier. And, you know then to, when you come home, you might even have things already organized, or you might have play dates already set up. So your PITA kid can really jump right in when they need to jump right in. And, so everything you can think of, you need to do to yourself first.
Yeah.
Of course, you want your child to sleep, but you've got to sleep too.
Right.
Of course, you want your child to eat well, but if you don't eat well, you'll go out of balance, and that'll be a problem for you. If you don't exercise, if you're a PITA person and you don't take the time to exercise yourself, it's trouble. And if you're a kapha person, even worse, you really need that exercise. So, yoga is very, very valuable. Practicing meditation, we recommend transcendental meditation in the book. I mean, these are all vital things. You can take 20 minutes to practice transcendental meditation. You're a new person. And suddenly, you can behave differently with your kid. And so healing yourself is one of the all-time most important things that can make you a better parent. And it's not an easy thing. We know we're not, we know all the troubles in today's world, but it's so easy to let yourself get tired. And if you get out of imbalance, then there's just no hope whatsoever.
Right, exactly. And it's really about doing the self-study on yourself first, right? Understanding your brain body type, and then also the self-care routines. We talk about that a lot on the podcast, that as the parent in the family, everything revolves around you. So self-care is not selfish. In fact, it's necessary for everything to function right. And also being a role model for your child.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Exactly.
Yeah. So also I was very interested in the concept of attention and appreciation when it comes to your child. Can you explain that concept a little bit more, please?
Yeah, you're mentioning our tools, all of our tools, and we use, we spell out the word Dharma. So the first one is kind of, each one stands for something. So you did H for heal yourself, and then, D, discover which type you are. And now you got it up to A, attention and appreciation. And that's a big one. I think a lot of scientific research has been done on that. Not that I actually care that much about scientific research, even though I am a scientist. I mean, I think common sense tells us this forever and ever. But a lot of different studies have shown how critical attention and appreciation is, and that children that don't get enough attention, their brain just doesn't develop correctly. It's very, very serious. And appreciation and gratitude, these are like really, really, they're like food for a child. They really heal a child. They develop the child beautifully. And so we put a big emphasis on, again, a lot of this would have to do with understanding who you are too. Because, if you don't get who your child is, it's hard to build that relationship. But essentially where you put your attention, that's what grows strongest. So if you put your attention on love and caring and supporting, then the child will be very responsive as you get older. If you're the ultimate disciplinarian and just, don't give your child very much attention, but just tell them, do this, do that, later on, it's going to come back to bite you. So these are huge. And, some children cry, and you have to know what's the right amount. And nowadays, everybody's pretty clear. You got to pick up your child. You have to, provide ways of giving the attention to that child, because otherwise, we used to have this kind of very cold attitude. You could just let them cry and not worry about it. But every common sense, every scientific study is saying that's not true at all. You don't want to spoil a child, but at the same time, your attention is absolutely the most important thing in their brain development. It's just vital for all those good connections to be made in the brain is attention and appreciation. So this is a very, very well understood, well appreciated concept, and it helps when you know how the child's brain is developing. Yeah. When they're very young, it's unbelievable how many connections are being made. It's just phenomenal. And then, there's certain points where your attention is just vital for those connections. I mean, some are genetically organized, but a lot of them are organized. It's nature versus nurture. Your nurturing really makes a difference on which connections are made in the brain, especially in those first 3 years. And then, the other years too. I mean, a teenager, the front part of their brain isn't connected up. And so we assume they're an adult. They look like an adult, but they're not an adult. And so if we give them the wrong type of attention, and that can be either too much of a disciplinarian or too lenient. Either way, if you go either way, it can be a huge problem. So it has to be just the right amount where, it's genuine. It's from your heart. It's not some fake thing that, I'm really interested in what you're doing in school, and then you just turn your attention to something else. You literally got to go to school. You got to find out what they're doing. You got to participate with them. It's so weird today how people are, they're so happy to send their child to some expensive school and not pay much attention. And then, they wonder why their child, why they have problems later on. And, it's like your child is your most precious item in the world. If that child doesn't get nurtured at the early stages, you've got huge problems later on. Forget about how wealthy you are. Forget about where you live, what kind of cars you have. Those are all ridiculous. If your child's unhappy, that's what's going to kill you, nothing else. If you're only happy as your least happy child, really.
Yeah, so true. And I totally agree with you. You can't outsource your child for your child's development. It really starts at a very young age. And I'd love to delve deeper, Dr. Wallace, into the 4 main age groups and the brain development at each stage, if we could, just so that people can understand, because I think this is really interesting. And you talk about the first years from 0 to 3, that obviously the child now is the brain is just developing. Can you talk a little bit about that age group, or what's happening in the brain?
Well, the brain's, unassembled. I mean, we're given all the number of neurons we need, but the connections haven't been made. And so there's a huge things, you can see it in a child that that it takes a little while for their visual system to develop. They're sort of looking at you, but they're not. And then suddenly by 6 months, they're suddenly paying attention to everything because this system is developed. And by 2 years, the hearing system is all connected. And so they can start to get involved with speech. And so there's all these, subtle things going on. And first of all, just knowing that there are, literally millions of connections being made all the time, and that the brain is amazingly dynamic, that tells you, hey, you can't, you have to be careful here. The child's really, a lot of work is going on in that brain to make all these connections. So we do everything we can to kind of help nurture it, help, and just the understanding, like, wow, this, 0 to 3 is this phenomenal time of the growth of connections. They just weren't there before. And so you kind of marvel at each new thing your child does, and wow, okay, some other new area of the brain's been connected. Isn't this fun? When they can talk, wow, that's just so cool. And, you get from those ages from 4 to 9, and it's like amazing. The right and left brain are being connected. They're learning how to interact socially. And again, all of this is based on the fact that different parts of the brain are being connected. Their speech centers are all suddenly working, and if you have a vita child, they never stop talking. endless, I mean, they, oh my God, I wish that one got delayed a little bit, but they start the earliest and they're moving at, warp speed. So, and a confident child, you kind of know they could be slower in school. And so maybe they need your help do things because they're the slow learners. And once they remember, they won't forget it. But, the teacher may not recognize the Vata kid as the quick learner and the Kapha as the slow learner, and they might treat them as the same. So you as a parent have to kind of help and further that along. And then, of course, so that's a big, big time of many connections. But the teenage years are really the most insane years. It's child is occupied by aliens, so you really need to kind of recognize that certain parts of the brain aren't connected, particularly the frontal parts of the brain, and they're very much action-reaction oriented. Yeah. They're not aware, you give them a driver's license, they start driving, and they may not really completely get that, okay, you shouldn't drink when you drive, you shouldn't text when you drive. They're not, their frontal part of their brain hasn't quite given them the executive orders they need to say, this is incredibly dangerous, don't do it. They're much more into their kind of sensory and motor parts of the brain, which are, hey, this is really fun. I love this, let's do multiple things at the same time. And, that's so dangerous. So you have to set boundaries on them. I mean, younger kids too with electronics these days, you've got to set boundaries. It's just, they can get overwhelmed by all the virtual reality out there. So you have to protect the brain as it develops, and knowing what the child's going through at each stage can be really, really helpful. And, finally, from 18 to 25 years, finally, they're getting the final development. But even college kids are crazy. So it's not there yet.
Right.
And partying and they're already, but you watch each year go by and it's like, oh my God, finally they're getting it. And it is their brain. It's not just like their behavior is bad. It's really that they need boundaries. I mean, I never got the idea of why a kid is at home, has curfews, you're watching what they're doing. This is in the United States, and they go to high school. And suddenly at some magical age of 17 or 18, you send them to college where you literally are encouraging them to stay up all night, go to parties, and do whatever they want in a completely unsupervised environment, co-ed dorms. I mean, it's such a contrast to what they had a few days before they left home. And to think that initiation is going to go smoothly is crazy. Yeah. And, I don't know. I don't get it, but everybody does it. And it's quite a big change for a kid. And hopefully you prepared them for it. Hopefully, you've given them some good instructions. And when they get there, they don't go completely nuts. And that, I think, those are the things you have to be aware of, that the brain isn't developed until 25 years old. It's not all the connections are there. So a lot of help is needed at every stage.
Absolutely. And then the help kind of shifts and changes. But as a parent, the role really is nurturing, being supportive, and providing guidance, right? You're trying to corral this child. We give
very specific advice at each stage.
Yeah.
You can't be a helicopter pilot parent. Right, you can't, especially when they're going to college, you have to do it in such a nice and easy way where you're not, trying to watch over them, which you can't do anyway. But there's just, we try to give lots of hints and examples and stories to, make it real, so that it's not just some set of rules that people are supposed to obey. We try to, really, really pick as many real instances as we've gone through, because both the authors, we each had our set of kids with our own set of problems. And so, we had a lot of experience, and our wives really did a huge amount in the book. There's all kinds of interesting notes from the wives in the books, which pay attention to particular things,
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. And you mentioned there electronics, and I know that's a big question for many parents today. And could you talk a little bit about the effect of electronics on our brain?
Yeah, I mean, you know, nowadays we know we have these pleasure centers in the brain where we have this neurotransmitter dopamine, and we know that it's the source of addiction. And we know that, you know, we know a lot about it, and we know that certain things can stimulate it. And once you get a kind of habit that's formed, which I think of as kind of a neural circuit, once that neural circuit has kind of connected with this dopamine center, this pleasure center, then you've got some serious problems. And it's not, you know, electronics, every other kid is playing games, you know, television is there. I mean, it's just, it's so pervasive. You know, you can see a 4-year-old get on, you know, nicely borrow your phone, and then the next thing you know, they're just, you know, having a blast on some game. They know how to use the phone better than you do, you know, and they're only 4 years old.
Right.
And then you try to get your phone back, and it's like the world has suddenly ended.
Yeah,
and
meltdown.
Those huge meltdown, super meltdown. And, you know, there's a certain point, especially with electronics, where it's like an addiction. And they're going to go through withdrawal for that brief moment in time. And unless you've set boundaries, unless you've thought this out really carefully, unless you handle the situation well, it's going to be a nightmare every time. And ultimately you just get used to it, and you just, you know, go through the temper tantrum and then move on. But it's quite powerful how electronics can be so addictive, and it can penetrate the brain in ways that, you know, normal games and outdoor activities don't. You know, it's a very unnatural kind of intense, super attention grabbing experience where they're doing something that just really dramatically excites them. Exactly. And that excitement brings on pleasure, and that pleasure then forms a habit, and they want it in a consistent fashion, and they're very unhappy when it's taken away. I mean, I guess, you know, kids were like that in the old days, where they'd be playing basketball or baseball, or they'd be doing, you know, running or having fun, and you call them in for dinner and they don't want to come in right away. But it's not quite the temper tantrum when you take away their game that they're intensely involved in. And it's become a whole new level of parenting that was never there before, and quite challenging, really.
Yeah, very challenging. And with the fact on a computer screen that it's really sensory overload, whereas if they're outside playing, they're getting information for their brain, for, you know, their programming, whereas on the computers or on games, it's just sensory overload and very minimal.
And even more than that, they're being exposed to things, you know, unless you have proper parental control, which is hard because kids are smart and they can borrow other people's computers. They can get exposed to all kinds of ideas and things that are really not that good for them at a young age. And so that's a whole new level of, you know, problems you have to deal with. And all the kind of mental health issues that young children are starting to have just because they're exposed to so many things on the internet that they would never have been exposed to as a kid before.
Right, exactly. And then, like you said, you have the meltdowns, and that's an issue in itself. However, I do think, you know, parents can have a bit of control there with switching off the Wi-Fi, which is something I recommend, especially in the evenings, because we have a lot of children now who have phones in their rooms and are getting on their phone in the middle of the night. So I highly recommend just switching off the power for everybody, which will be good for the parents and the children at a certain time of night. So there's no temptation there. So let's talk a little bit about meltdowns. I had a friend of mine contact me the other day, and her son was having a serious meltdown, and she was looking for some advice on what to do, because he seemed like he was very imbalanced. And in fact, we did discover he had a vata imbalance going on, a lot of bloating, a lot of gas, and waking up in the vata time of night. So could you talk to us a little bit about meltdowns, and how is there a difference between how you would treat the different types? Like, for example, I told my friend, it'd be great just to kind of ground them, put like heavy blankets on him, or, or I give him an Abhyanga oil massage, or just do some, hold him tight to ground him and do some deep breathing.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we have a little, again, one of these tools that we developed, which were 6 recommendations starting with a C. And the first one is check in with yourself and with your child. So if you're a Pitta parent, let's say, and you have a Vata child, you got to make sure you're sensitive, because if you're too Pitta, you're too, demanding, you're just going to make it worse. So you got to first of all make sure you're not overreacting yourself. And, if you missed a meal or you were up late, you're handicapped. And so that's one thing. And then you have to check the child. Like you said, if it's a Vata child, and the Vata child is imbalanced, has symptoms of imbalance, then wow, that's terrific. You can use all those great tools that you mentioned to help that child. So that's the first one. Second one is comfort the child. I mean, like you said, a big hug. Now, the Pitta kid may not want that. He's squirming around and going crazy, So, the Kapha kid will never stop hugging.
Yeah.
But so the hug has to be measured by...
appropriate.
Appropriately. Then you've got the third one is change, and it's change the brain state. So you said, like, give an Abhyanga, have some aroma oil that's sensitive, hugging them. And, again, a different child will use different tools to change their brain state. Pitta child, it just might be that you feed them at that time, and then suddenly the whole thing changes. Boom, it's gone. Kapha child, get them off the couch, get them to take a walk outside. That could do the whole thing right there. So they're just, different measures, some preventative, some during the time. The Pitta child in a temper tantrum, probably not much you can do. You just have to let it burn out and be aware that you should have prevented it. If you took them shopping and you didn't give them lunch on time, it's kind of your fault, really. Right. I mean, they're going to go ballistic if they don't get food on time,
Always need to have snacks in your bag when you have a Pitta child.
And then, choices. It's always nice when you can give the child a choice. If you've calmed down their brain state, and then you can let them make the choice. And if you can have a family meeting some weeks before and say, okay, now, what are the consequences if we, if this happens, how would you deal with it? And you let them get involved in, especially as they get older, in what should be the consequences. And either you can choose to stop right now and we can move on. We're in the middle of a toy store and you're screaming and yelling. You can either choose to stop right now, once they've calmed down, or, there'll be consequences. And that's the next one. You got to have consequences. Otherwise, nothing is, they just laugh and do whatever they want if they think you're not, kids are master psychologists. We all have.
They are.
They're sometimes it's like an old person born in a young body. They are brilliant at getting you to, exactly what they want, and they can do it in so many subtle and brilliant ways that you don't even know you're being manipulated. So, you really, really have to have consequences. And again, if you have family meetings and you can make charts and you can make these decisions ahead of time, it's so much better. And then they've made the decision and you remind them, well, remember, if you did this and this and this,
some accountability,
you had 45 minutes for electronics, but we just said if you went over that, then we'd take it away the next time, and so forth and so forth, And then finally, coaching. I mean, coaching is, in the end, there are different types of coaching you can give children, but you are their coach ultimately. There's skill coaching. You're the one that teaches them how to do certain skills. If you're cooking, they kind of learn to cook with you. If you're doing something outside, gardening, and they learn, that's good. And there's another kind of coaching, which is even more kind of basic and fundamental, and it's listening. A good coach listens. And so you listen. If they're a teenager and they want to tell you something, you stop talking and you listen, especially when their brain is calmed down, especially when they're out of whatever disaster they've been in. And then it's coaching from then on, and you listen to them and you ask them questions that are open-ended, good questions that let them come to conclusions about what they know what's right and wrong. They just need a little bit of guidance from you. And so, you give it to them, but you give it to them in a way where they are the ones that are in the end coming to the conclusion, and you help them meet those goals, whatever those goals they want. Oh, I want to get a better grade in school. Okay, well, what would that involve? Oh, I got to turn my homework in time. What would that involve? Well, got to go to bed earlier. Oh, good. Okay, well, let's make a plan. So tonight we'll turn off the Wi-Fi, we'll turn off the TV, we'll give ourselves a half an hour, and you'll get more sleep, and then you'll be better. It all leads back to Ayurveda in the end. But sometimes they like to have a goal out there that is important to them. And once they have that goal, then you can work backwards and figure out what are all the things they need to do to achieve that goal.
I love it. Yeah, so true. That's great tips there. Thank you so much. And I think also it's good to coach the child on their type, right?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. And,
the only thing you have to be careful about is not to give them any limitation. If they think
true. Not to label.
It could be limited, that is, you have to really, really focus on the good qualities and why, we need all types, yes, and why you're a combination of all types. So you may be a Vata person when it comes to learning, but you may be a Kapha person when it comes to sleeping. You actually may sleep a lot. And you get these odd combinations. So I think you're absolutely right. You need to teach them about themselves, but you always have to give them the notion that whatever type you are, you can be the greatest person in the world.
Absolutely.
Because great people are always unique combinations of everything,
Yeah, that's so true. I totally agree with you. And I'm glad you made that point, that not to label the child and not to box them in like this is your type. And it makes me think of my sister in Ireland as an occupational therapist, and she works a lot with children. And they use this great book called How Does Your Engine Run? To teach young children. And I love that thought, so she has a young boy coming in who's very Vata, can't sit still in school, getting in a lot of trouble. It's torture for them to sit at a desk all day. So she's like, okay, explaining to him, this is how your engine runs. And giving him tips of how he can, run the engine and then be able to go in and sit in class. So he'll go out into the yard and run around, several times and then come back in and be able to chill for a while and listen. So I think that's a great way of doing it with your child. Just bring it to their level and having them understand, okay, this is how your body, mind works, and this is what's good for you. And sometimes you may need to balance yourself out and bring it in, in their terminology that they can understand.
Right.
I think that's great. And you talked about having the family meetings as well and, improving family dynamics. And we talk a lot about, of course, dinacharya or daily routines in Ayurveda and the importance of routines, especially for children. And can you talk to us a little bit about that while they're developing, the importance of routines, and maybe give us a sample of a couple of those?
Yeah, the funny thing is it's such an interesting thing because the Vata child desperately needs a routine, and a big chart on their wall is like the greatest help to them. They don't like following a routine, but if they see it and you can point to it and they've helped make the chart, so it's like their chart and they enjoy it, then it's just a reminder, hey, isn't that right? Now we do this, we do that. Mm-hmm. Now a Kapha child loves that chart, but loves it too much. Yeah. And in some ways, you actually have to mix it up for a Kapha child. Even though, dinacharya is critical for them, you've got to give them some variety. You've got to, so maybe we take a walk one day and then we do something else the next day. It's activity day. a moment in the day, but you literally got to give them different ones because they get stuck on routine.
Mm-hmm.
Pitta is literally, you don't even need a chart. They've got it memorized in their brain. They know exactly what to do, what time. And the only thing that's important for them is, not getting overheated and eating on time. Otherwise, they're like goal oriented,
Mm-hmm.
All these people that write these books on how to change your habits, they're literally written by Pitta people for Pitta people. Like, it's insane. Nobody else, knows what to do. It's like, oh yeah, this. I mean, of course, if you're a Pitta person, that works.
Yeah.
But I think, and the Kaphas, you have to obviously give more time. The Vadas will be out the door in 2 seconds, but the Kapha will be slower and they'll take longer. So their chart, you might need a different chart for each one because they are different and they have different ways of doing it. And so, this biological rhythms is maybe one of the most important findings in modern science, that we have these rhythms, that they govern our body and that they're so critical. And we've messed them up enormously by all the things we do at night and all the weird worlds we live in. Mm-hmm. So the closer you can get back to a real nice, seasonal, daily routine is really, really good. It really helps in terms of diet. It helps in terms of all your health aspects. And so this is one of the great contributions of Ayurveda. I mean, Nobel Prize has been given for, a couple of years on biorhythms. So we get it, but Ayurveda really got it. They really understand,
Yeah, just such a great wealth of information to give us a good foundation for all those parents out there. And you gave some great tips today, Dr. Wallace. I really appreciate it. So where can people go to find out more, to find your book? And also you have a Dharma Parenting program online as well.
Yeah, there's a website, dharmaparenting.com. It's got a quiz on it. It's got probiotics for kids. It has a number of blogs. There's a course you can take, a real fun course that our university, Maharishi University of Management, offers. We have a whole master's program in training. We have an undergraduate master's, and we're just about to start a clinical doctoral program for people to have very extensive training in Ayurveda as a health coach. Mm-hmm. And these programs are organized. We have a lot of modern science. We have a Vaidya's there. We teach them what we call Maharishi Ayurveda, because Maharishi spent years, this was the founder of the Transcendental Meditation technique, years to revive Ayurveda and to, bring back a lot of the wisdom, particularly relating to consciousness and pulse diagnosis. Mm-hmm. So those are very vital parts of our programs. But these are part-time online programs. We do have a in-residence undergraduate program, but most of our students, we have 250 students right now, and in a couple of years, it'll go up to 600. And they're all, taking these programs. They're doctors, nurses, yoga therapists, massage therapists. And they're people who want to add Ayurveda to their repertoire of programs to help people. And parenting is one of those. A lot of people really find good help. And we do have a specific course on parenting you can take online. That's not a degree program, but just a short course. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of articles and resources, diet recommendations, all on dharmaparenting.com.
Fantastic. And for anybody looking to study with Maharishi University of Management, it's an amazing university, great programs. And like you said, Dr. Wallace, the number of students is increasing every year.
Yeah, it's really sweet to see that suddenly Ayurveda is becoming popular all over the world and that people have begun to recognize it. I mean, in those two other books I wrote, Gut Crisis and the Rest and Repair Diet, I really talk a lot about how I think the discovery of the microbiome is going to help Ayurveda enormously, because there's so many concepts that were hard to understand scientifically. Even the dosha type, brain-body type, they're found that each one has a specific microbiome, and they're very interesting characteristics. The daily and seasonal microbiome has daily and seasonal changes. Spices, things like triphala and other ginger and other Ayurveda spices, turmeric, they all have a very interesting effect on the microbiome, increasing the healthy bacteria and decreasing the unhealthy ones. All of the diet programs that Ayurveda has, they're so simple and good. And I put a big emphasis on rebooting the microbiome and resetting your digestion because, from an Ayurvedic viewpoint, all disease begins in the gut. Mm-hmm. And if you can reduce ama, you can increase agni through very, very simple Ayurveda habits, then you can keep yourself in a very good state of health. And so on the website docgut.com, docgut.com, I have a quiz there and also probiotic recommendations for adults and a lot of different advice that's primarily Ayurveda. And then there's another site, doshaguru.com, like dosha and then guru.com. And that's been going on for a long time. And it has many, many articles, recipes. It also has a quiz. And it really, really speaks directly to Ayurveda and all the people interested in Ayurveda. Amazing. So, a lot of resources out there.
Great wealth of knowledge. That's amazing. So where can people go to find your books?
Yeah, Amazon in different countries too.
Perfect. Well, Dr. Wallace, thank you so much. I would definitely love to have you back to talk about the Gust crisis and the rest and repair diet. So I hope we can get together again. But I really appreciate you sharing all this information today. I think it's really going to help parents and also for putting the information out there, making it so accessible online that parents now know where they can go and find out more, not only about their own brain body type, but then to help their children succeed in life and to nurture them and support them. I think it's amazing information. This is what we need to teach people at a young age about themselves so that they can thrive in life. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And take good care of yourself, Dr. Wallace.
All right. Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Dr. Wallace. Lots of great parenting tips there. And I'd love to hear your thoughts over on the Facebook group, the Elements of Ayurveda podcast Facebook group. Please head on over there. Let me know your thoughts on this conversation. And I'll put a link in the show notes. Also in the show notes, you'll find all the links that Dr. Wallace mentioned, all the websites, and also links to my services. I offer online consultations and cleanses and courses, and also information on my upcoming retreat, the French Riviera Ayurveda and Yoga Retreat, happening October 11th to the 13th in 2019. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't already done so, I would really appreciate a rating and review, and that helps more people find the show so we can spread this wonderful wisdom of Ayurveda. Take good care of yourself, be well,